Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Daylight savings time has occurred. We are, although a storm is approaching, it's starting to feel a little bit more like spring, I guess. I don't know if that's just perception, but one of the things that really starts to transition us out of the winter and into the spring is the NCAA Men's Division I Basketball Championship, commonly known as March Madness. And whether you are somebody who is completely casual about this, I would assume if you're listening to this, you have a certain level of interest, but perhaps you just want to hear our guests' beautiful vocalizations today, and that's why you're listening. But whether you're involved in some kind of office pool or whatever, or if you're actually going to wager on games, or if you're just somebody who's a fan of sports in general, college basketball, look out. Here we go. Tis the season, and things tip off in Dayton. We're recording on Monday, so it tips off tomorrow with the first four. Providing us with the most exceptional analysis you will find anywhere is WPRO sports producer and co-host of the Kevin Max Sports Hour on WPRO, 6 o'clock weekdays, the one and only Brett Ferruccio. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Bill. It's a pleasure to be back. My second appearance here on the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Yes.
And I'm doing it remote. So now I've done one in person and one remote. That's got to put me in some sort of EGOT type club, I would imagine, right?
It's a limited edition. Probably less than 10 people have done both formats, and
there you go. It's like a BGOT.
I love it. The last time you were here was with Andy Gresh. Now that was when you were on the Gresh show on WPRO. Again, now you're with the mighty Kevin McNamara, K-Mac, as he is known throughout the land. And March Madness, it's a time of year where, in terms of sports on the sports calendar, you're coming off of what used to be a really desolate period, the end of the Super Bowl and March Madness. I guess you could argue the conference tournaments in college basketball were kind of the revitalization of sports, a little bit spring training. But now we're getting to a time of year in the sports calendar where things start to get exciting again, where, obviously with college basketball, obviously you've got spring training ramping up. You've got a little bit more interest from a general audience in NBA basketball, even in hockey, and the Masters are coming up. But the marquee event in a lot of ways is March Madness. It just sort of transcends into pop culture, at least in a way that college sports in the Northeast especially don't do otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hey, half the country knows about a nun from Chicago, right? And why do we know? Why do we know about Sister Jean? Because, Loyola Chicago made a run in the tournament, and, things like that happen all the time that really, suck in the masses. So it's not just the fact that anybody can, throw out a $20 bill and win a bracket pool, but there are all these other side stories. I mean, you and I are of an age now where we're used to Gonzaga being Gonzaga, right? But we're also of that age where we saw that happen, right? And who are these guys? Where is Gonzaga? Spokane, Washington, huh? These guys, they seem to be, upset killers, and now they or giant killers rather, and they did it for so long that now they're an established team and they're at the top of the rankings year in and year out. So yeah, these storylines are great, and they're what suck people in. And I always tell people, Bill, I was born in March of 1983, so yes, thank you for your birthday wishes right here.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
But what I always tell people is that was the year that, Jim Valvano and NC State made this absolutely berserk run through the NCAA tournament, upsetting everybody. Now, obviously, I was, an infant, but I like to tell people that I think that seeped in somehow, because that's what made me just crazy for college basketball. And I really always have been my entire life. So that's why I'm excited for the tournament, and I'm excited to come on and talk to you about it.
Yeah, and that Valvano famous literal run onto the court, is a famous kind of iconic moment.
Looking for somebody to hug. He couldn't find anybody to hug.
That's right. Greatest teeth in college basketball of all time as well. You must
pretty good.
Absolutely. So, last year was St. Peter's. That was the darling of America, really. Doug.
That's right.
Was Doug, I almost said Doug Peterson. That would not be the correct person, but what he plays for Brian now. Why do I not know his name?
Yeah, Doug Eddard.
Eddard, yes,
Doug
thank
Eddard,
you. Exactly. Right. Of course, with the the look of that the ladies fell for, so to speak. Who do you have your eye on?
He looked like somebody you would have been hanging out with in Brooklyn.
Absolutely.
That's basically the look he had. And yeah, St. Peter's made that run. Shaheen Holloway was able to parlay that into the head coaching job at his alma mater, Seton Hall. So again, that's another part of the tournament too. You get these up and coming coaches that sort of push forward and make a name for themselves. So there's a lot of opportunity to be had. And if you're asking me for who the next St. Peter's is, that's certainly a tall order. And I certainly wouldn't recommend, if you're filling out your bracket and you're trying to predict the next St. Peter's or the next VCU or the next George Mason, these teams that have made these unlikely runs through the tournament in years past, it's a fool's errand. And you could really get caught up in yourself where suddenly you have, a Sweet 16 with 2 12s, a 13, and, a 9, and all the ones have lost. And yeah, you might have a shot at taking down, some sort of mythical ESPN or Warren Buffett prize. But more often than not, you're going to find yourself after the first weekend saying, man, I probably just should have gone with a little more chalk there. And maybe I would have been a little more successful. But yeah, there are some, I've been looking at the brackets all morning, and there are some teams that pop in terms of, their ability as higher seeds to make a run. And there are other, like VCU, who I just named, is in the West region, which unfortunately for them is stacked. But as a 12 seed, they could take down St. Mary's, and then they'd be looking at a matchup against UConn or Iona, which again, that's tough sledding. But, you have to be bold. I would say, if I'm giving bracket advice in general, just general advice, you have to be bold, but you don't want to be silly, like I just said. So, you want to look for those teams in the highest leverage spots where you'll have them and no one else will. So you don't want to get too cute, but that it's not going to be all the favorites winning, because it never is any year.
Yeah, you mentioned that UConn Iona game. That's an interesting game in and of itself.
Ooh, I love
obviously
it.
Rick Pitino at Iona and UConn with Danny Hurley, and UConn's been up and down this year. They ultimately finished strong enough to, earn that 4 seed, but that's an area where somebody might look at and say, again, I'm not giving advice here. Please don't blame me if your vehicles are repossessed, but that's an interesting matchup.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup. Someone, Eileen, I know you know this, and some of your listeners may know me. I'm heavy into analytics when it comes to ranking these teams and just betting in general, because for years, I got upset that, oh man, Vegas is always right. Vegas, how are they always get this stuff? And so what you try to do is, use the stuff that they use, and sort of lean on them. And the reason I bring that up is because UConn, as a 4 seed, they might be the 4th best team in the country, period. From an analytical standpoint, you'll find them in the top 5 of most, good analytical ratings. So matched up against Iona, it's a sexy matchup because of the Rick Pitino factor. A lot of people think Rick Pitino is coaching his last games at Iona, and will be headed to St. John's sooner rather than later. So interesting on that front, where maybe Hurley's coaching against a former, or future rather, Big East foe. But yeah, the UConn Huskies, Providence fans saw them. They're playing some of the best basketball in the country right now. And that West region, where Kansas is the number 1 seed, is pretty stacked. You look at Kansas coming out of the Big 12. Bill Self has been sick, but he's allegedly going to be back for the tournament. They, much like UConn, are analytically, a top 6, top 8 team. Oddly enough, most people would have UConn ahead of them. You find the Gonzaga Bulldogs in that same region. We just talked about them a little bit just in terms of their, national profile and things like that. They're playing some of the best basketball in the country right now. They just blew out St. Mary's, who's a 5 seed in that region. They trounced them by like 30 in the West Coast Conference Championship. And St. Mary's is a good team. So, there are people who are going to look at St. Mary's in that VCU game that we just talked about and say, well, they just got smoked like a sturgeon against Gonzaga. I'm not going to pick them. But, stranger things have happened. And especially when it comes to betting, teams that get blown out the game before the tournament, they cover the spread in the first round at about a 65% clip. So, you think, because a team just got, blown out that, oh, they're not playing well. And that doesn't mean they're going to win. But there are a lot of trends that tell you things that you may not see with your eye. And then we got, a team I know you and I both really love down there, UCLA.
Yeah.
Matching up in the first round against UNC Asheville. And UCLA is without one of their better players. Jalen Clark has been injured. He's one of the best defensive players in the country. PC fans think maybe like Devin Carter-ish. Like that's the type of defensive impact Clark brings to the table. So for UCLA to be without him, I know my futures bets wish that, he was still on the team, but that's just a really stacked region from top to bottom. And I could see anybody really coming out of there right now, but just a lot of talent. We didn't even talk about TCU, who has a great team as well, but I think all eyes will be, and rightfully so, on UConn, Kansas, and UCLA.
Yeah, when you look at the number 1 seeds, Alabama, Houston, Kansas, and Purdue, is there a team that jumps out to you that has any kind of vulnerability, not necessarily in the first or even second round of the tournament, but just in terms of making a run that's significant beyond even the Sweet 16? Anybody jump out that you say, that's my weakest 1 seed?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like Purdue, and I haven't liked Purdue all season. The kid, Zach Edey, they're 7'4" big man. I just think, hey, if this were 1983, what we were talking about, then you know what? I would probably march that team straight through to the Final Four, because that's back to the basketball. You got a big guy who's tough to stop. And it's not like Purdue is just a one-man show, but, I just keep watching all year. And, hey, they won the Big Ten, and they won the Big Ten tournament, so who am I? But Purdue, when I look at that top line, Purdue is definitely a team that sticks out to me as one where I don't have nearly as much confidence in them as I do the other 3 number 1 seeds.
Providence, the Providence Friars, they're an 11 seed. They match up against Kentucky. It's not Kentucky's best year ever, that's for sure. Nonetheless, it's John Calipari. It's not an easy matchup. The Friars started out in what was, maybe not a repeat of last year from any standpoint, but a good season, a very good season. I don't want to say a collapse towards the end, but certainly a regression, and public opinion has soured on them. They were the last team into the tournament, excluding the first 4 teams that will play in the first 4 portion of the tournament this Tuesday. What do you make of the Friars this year from a local standpoint, even, not even in terms of any kind of wager or if you're in an office pool, but can we expect to see Providence playing this coming weekend even?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tall order. I mean, you got the revenge factor, right? Bryce Hopkins started his college career at Kentucky. He didn't really play, transferred to Providence. He's averaged 16.5 points, 9 rebounds per game for Ed Cooley's Friars. But Providence has really sort of lost their identity coming down the stretch. This is a team and a program that usually likes to focus on defense and toughness. And, this year, riding off of last year, and I encouraged this. I'm sure he listened as well. But I encouraged, Ed Cooley, you got to open up your offense. You have all these now great offensive players, last year with Durham and Horkler, Minaya, and guys like that. And now Hopkins, I think, is the most talented of the bunch as of yet. And so they did, but I think along the way, they sort of lost, that toughness, lost that defense. Teams like Xavier, Seton Hall, UConn started really lighting them up and taking advantage of them inside and just getting to those loose balls. So it's going to be a tough spot for Providence. The silver lining, as we talked about after their loss to UConn, is they seem to sort of find something in the second half against the Huskies.
Right.
And, the Huskies are one of the best teams in the country. So that's, that can be a tough bar to sort of meet. But, if Ed Cooley's able to sort of mix and match correctly, then Providence does have a shot. Because, look, I was at Syracuse in 2003 when the Orange won the national championship. And I said before this season started that this Providence team kind of looked like that Syracuse team to me. If Bryce Hopkins could be a Carmelo Anthony type impact player. And I said at the time too, like, that's a really high bar. I understand that. But at the same time, a lot of similarities, similar size, similar pedigree in terms of, coming out of high school and things like that. And Hopkins has had a very good season, all first team, all Big East. But my bar when I was saying that, it was like, I thought he would be someone who could potentially be in the conversation for National Player of the Year, someone who could be
really
potentially a first team All-American. And that's not a shot at the young man. He's had a tremendous season. But that's sort of, had that happened, I think we'd be talking about Providence right now in a spot similar to where Xavier is, as like a 3 seed with a bullet. But that being said, that all of that is still there. They're still a very talented team. I just think it's really tough to flip that specific switch, the defensive and intensity switch. If you're missing threes, I think you can flip that switch. But if you aren't playing with toughness and intensity the way Ed Cooley's Friars normally are, I think it's going to be tough to flip that switch, and they're going to have their hands full in the first round against Kentucky. That's for sure.
Well, at least they're not the Rams, put it that way. They're in the tournament. They have some momentum going. Now, what do you make of the rumors surrounding Ed Cooley and potentially departing for, be it Georgetown, or anywhere else? I mean, he's been named as a potential coaching candidate at other schools. If I recall, Michigan at one point, it's
right.
been there. What do you make of the rumors?
Well, there are a lot of smart athletic directors and SIDs around the country, because Ed Cooley would be one of my first calls if I had an opening. I've long had just tremendous respect for Ed Cooley, even before I started covering the Friars. I've just always admired the way he runs his program, the types of players he brings into his program, and the way he's able to get a lot out of his players. So I can't fault any program for wanting to reach out and possibly bring it on board. That being said, I don't know what someplace like Georgetown offers him that Providence doesn't, aside from maybe more money, right? So, I can't fault anybody for wanting to take more money. That's certainly not, I always say, Bill, when people ask me about stuff like this, I'm like, I'm the wrong guy to ask, because I wanted Brad Stevens to stay at Butler. I thought that was a pretty good gig, right? It's like,
hey, Jim Larinaga to stay at George Mason. I mean, come on.
That's right. I mean, hey, what's the big deal? You're making a bunch of money and you're running things your way. So I understand that money is a main motivator, but from where I sit, I really think that's the only thing that Georgetown can offer. The days of Georgetown being a major player are over, right? And, as a Syracuse fan, I know that better than anyone, and we're probably next on the legacy chopping block. But, I guess the story would be he's going to go down there and, restore Georgetown. And it's just like, man, you're doing it here, right? You've built a program that to me is on par with anything Georgetown has ever had. So, again, I think it would just take money, but it's smart of Georgetown to call. I will say, Kevin McNamara brought up a great point that I hadn't even really considered. Val Ackerman, the commissioner of the Big East, you would think she'd be pretty interested in what's going on here, because whenever you bring in a coach, as Georgetown would be doing, you want it to strengthen your conference, right? That just sort of makes sense. But that obviously wouldn't be the case here. Unless then Providence turned around in my scenario and got Rick Pitino, brought Ricky back, right? Ricky. But yeah, no, I can't blame any program for wanting Ed Cooley, but I would be a little surprised. I have no information, but I would be a little surprised if Georgetown was the one that eventually got it done.
All right. It's the elephant in the room, pun fully intended based on the logo of their program, but Alabama, The summary is that Darius Miles is a former player. He was involved and has been indicted and charged with capital murder. And star player Brandon Miller, allegedly here, supplied a weapon and potentially blockaded an exit in that murder. Yet Miller has still been on the floor. He's still played. That in and of itself has yielded tremendous controversy. In fact, there have been some commentators that have been screaming that, you've got scenarios where, the most minute NCAA violations, a coach buys his team pizza with personal funds, that blows up into, an apocalyptic type scenario. Yet you've got somebody on the floor who is a star player that is in one way, shape, or form tied to a murder. Your take on Alabama, can they overcome this as a 1 seed and find themselves, in a legitimate position as a contender in the tournament? But more importantly, what is this? What is this story? And how is Miller on the floor playing college basketball in the midst of this murder?
Yeah, I tell you, it's a bad look for CBS all the way around. The fact that they have to deal with this. They started off the broadcast last night, and Greg Gumbel comes on and awkwardly is generous, addresses the situation. Alabama sidestepped some sort of off the. He made it sound like the guy got a flat tire on the way to the arena, and it's just like, okay, like you knew this was going to be sloppy, but yeah, look, I know nothing about law enforcement, particularly in Alabama, and I don't pretend to be a district attorney. But I know that looking from the outside, it certainly seems strange that what Miller has admitted to doing isn't worthy of some sort of criminal complaint or some sort of charges being filed. I'm not saying the kid should be in jail necessarily or anything like that, but the fact that nothing arose from that just seems strange to me. But hey, maybe it seems strange because of what I laid out, that I don't know anything about that stuff. I thought from the jump, Bill, that this was a no-brainer for Alabama, basically, of all places. You sit him. He is going to be a lottery pick. He will be getting millions of dollars in the NBA within months. Okay, so the talk of, the kid's future. Hey, I don't want to necessarily say the kid can't have a future and cancel the kid because of his alleged involvement in this. But that's step one of why this is such a gimme for Alabama. They should have just sat him down because they know, okay, you know what? We don't want this on our program, and this is a bad look, and this kid's going to be fine anyway, right? So that would be number one. And number two, from an Alabama standpoint, which made this a no-brainer for me, is the football program, okay? Everybody knows, as much as we like March Madness, football runs the show when it comes to NCAA sports. It's the football TV contracts. That's where all the money is. And nobody should know that better than the University of Alabama, who's had the best and most profitable football program in the country for the better part of the last 25 years or so, right? So, they are putting him out there in an attempt to win an NCAA basketball championship. And I know, again, I love college basketball and I know how important that is, but it's almost like, why? It's like, you need everything, do you, Alabama? You need to have the best football team and the best basketball team. You couldn't just sort of, let things be here in terms of, this isn't a good look for us to be playing this guy. And maybe we should sit him down so that, we just don't have to have this hanging over our program. So, to me, it would have just been an easy choice for them to sit him down amidst all this, because it's a tragic situation. Someone was murdered, right? And he was there. And just because he hasn't been charged, again, doesn't mean he has to be, part of the basketball team moving forward. And, people like you and I, Bill, would probably want to ask, be like, I wonder if he were averaging 3 points a game, if he would still be on the team, right? So, to me, it just seems like, a greedy situation from the Alabama Crimson Tide. That being said, if people are going to reluctantly accept this, I guess, after that, but they're one of the most complete teams in the country, and there's good reason why they're a number 1 seed. I wouldn't be surprised that they'll be hanging around deep into the tournament.
All right. Do you have a a pick for a national champion that you can reveal, or are we encroaching on an upcoming episode of the KMAX Sports Hour? If we ask that question, what's going on here?
No, neither of those things are true. I don't have a pick yet. Look, I was a big booster of the Creighton Blue Jays all season long. They very much have disappointed me. I've been a big booster of the Marquette Golden Eagles. So far, they have not disappointed. And we talked about UCLA earlier. I'd be all in on them if they were fully healthy, but it's just unfortunate right now that they're not. The one piece of advice I can give to people out there is, if you are looking to, bet on the NCAA tournament, I advise taking some of these longer shots you like and betting them to win the whole thing. And you can set yourself up in a position where either you can hedge against yourself once they make it deeper into the tournament, and that could be a little tricky, but it's really not as hard as people think. Or you could just, again, it's from an enjoyment standpoint, right? So you get in these situations where, I think, the number one team is the best team and you want to bet on them to win. That's totally fine too, but the payout just isn't there, and the excitement factor, like we're looking to build the excitement, right, Bill? So
exactly.
I would look at futures bets, and if you're looking at teams, there's really no better place to look than the Big East. Like I said, Marquette, UConn, Creighton, Xavier. You'd be in good company betting with all those teams to cut down the nets, and I expect the Big East to have a very good NCAA tournament.
He's Brett Ferruccio at Rooch Nation on Twitter. You can hear him every single weeknight, 6 o'clock on WPRO, along with KMAC on the KMAC Sports Hour, and a living legend. Thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you, Bill. It's always a pleasure, my friend. Ask me anytime, and if I don't say no, I'll be back.
Beautiful.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.